Bună dimineața!
Good morning,
Stimați reprezentanți ai mass media,
esteemed mass media representatives and citizens. Thank you very much for being with us today and for watching the Promo-LEX Association press conference regarding the 11th of July SNAP Parliamentary Elections Observation Mission. Today, we'd like to introduce you to the second monitoring report of the observation mission. I would also like to mention at the outset that the mission is financially supported by a number of partners, a number of international organizations. First of all is the United States Agency for International Development, USAID, and there's also support from the Netherlands Embassy Office in Chisinau, the Soros Foundation Moldova. Also, the mission is conducted under the Civic Coalition for Free and Fair Elections. The monitoring period covered by this report is the 12th of May till the 25th of May. Certain activities of the election contenders, certain processes, though, had a slightly different period of time. The monitoring period was a little bit different, but I will mention that when that is relevant throughout the press conference. I would like to start the presentation of the report by highlighting a number of issues regarding the legal framework. First of all, we've noted in the second report as well, the fact that at this moment in time, there still isn't a decision of the National Public Health Agency. There aren't guidelines passed by the Extraordinary National Commission for Public Health covering or including the rules of conduct during the pandemic, during the election campaign. On the 90th of May, in fact, Czech has requested the agency to provide information on the measures of prevention and control to prevent and control COVID, asking about any amendments to the guidelines since the presidential elections, and also asking whether there's been any amendments in terms of the list of PPEs that the electoral staff organizing the elections would require. As far as we know, as of the 25th of May, no answer has been provided to this request of Czech. Concurrently, the last meeting and decision passed by the Public Health Agency is dated 29th of April. That's decision number 54 that says that the state of emergency in public health is to be established by the territorial public health committees on the basis of local COVID incidence indicators. From our point of view, this sort of an approach could lead to certain difficulties for contenders, for the election contenders at local level, at regional, territorial level, because they might be confused, not knowing exactly what are the rules of conduct across the regions. Also note that, as I said, the old guidelines were not updated and new guidelines were not approved. And this, although by the 21st of May, a number of election contenders have already started their work. It's on the 25th of May that they started their electoral work. Another uncertainty around the legal framework has to do with the interpretation of an article of the Electoral Code, that's Article 51, Paragraph 4. And the uncertainty is around the fact that the article says that there is interdiction to hold accountable or to impose sanctions on election contenders during the electoral period without the consent of the electoral body. However, having looked and researched the national legislation, Promo-LEX has identified that in 1999, an identical rule in terms of form and content as the current one, that is in Article 51, Paragraph 4 of the Electoral Code, such a rule was declared unconstitutional back then by decision of the Constitutional Court. That was decision number 43, dated 1999. And thus we believe that the current provision in Article 51, Paragraph 4, we believe it cannot be applied by the authorities. These are not to be followed by the election Contenders. Inter alia, would like to note that back then in 1999, the Constitutional Court has established that, according to the Supreme Law, only the President of the Republic of Moldova, the MPs, and foreign officials, ambassadors on mission to Moldova have immunity. Concurrently, the international rules do not provide for the election contenders special protection in case of crimes, offenses, or contraventions. And also, considering the rules that back then were brought to attention, turns out that the electoral body would have some duties that are only typical of courts, which would be in violation of Articles 14 and 15 of the Constitution. That is to say, such powers are not fit for the electoral body, for the Central Electoral Commission. Another issue around still around the legal framework has to do with the financing of election campaigns, the financing of organizing elections, to be more precise. In the report, we highlighted again the fact that the government, at this date, has identified only 70 million lei, which represents 56% of the expenses estimated by CEC, the Central Electoral Commission. On the 19th of May, a letter was sent to CEC saying that it can provide the Commission the required funds starting with the 20th of June, after all the costs will have been identified. And so we note now that it's till the 25th of May, though CEC still approved no decision regarding the expenses review, and the government did not pass any regulatory act regarding the appropriation of funds required for carrying out the elections as requested on the basis of the CEC estimated budget. With no government decision regarding the expenses required for organizing snap elections, we are concerned about the uncertainty around the capacity of the authorities, of the central public authorities, to identify enough resources for the carrying out of elections. These are a few of the observations that we put down in the report for the electoral framework. Now, with regards to the electoral bureaus and their activity and their performance in the monitored period, we noted that CEC has established 38 level 2 electoral constituencies and 37 councils by the legal deadlines. However, for constituency number 3 from Bender, no council was established. The parliamentary parties have delegated members to all the electoral council, to all the DECs. However, there were 7 cases where no member was appointed by district councils to DECs, and 1 case when no member was appointed by courthouses. We have also noted that the membership of the DECs is gender imbalanced. That is to say, 67% of the members are women and 33% are men. During the monitoring period, CEC has had mixed meetings. There is physical and virtual meetings, and it had 6 such meetings altogether. In total, 63 decisions were approved. 37 were decisions establishing level 2 DECs. 4 decisions had to do with accrediting national and international observers, and 22 decisions had to do with amendments to other acts. Also, a regulation was approved, and 2 other regulations were adjusted in the light of matters specific to the proportionate representation electoral system. In this context, Promo-LEX welcomes the approval by CEC of the regulation on the coverage of the electoral campaign, and this one contains provisions against hate speech and discrimination. Until the 25th of May, the CEC has accredited 77 observers. Of them, 68 were national Promo-LEX observers and 9 international observers. CEC has also undertaken a number of actions to organize elections for the Moldovan citizens living in the Transnistrian region, and perhaps we will need to keep an eye on the decisions that will be taken around those actions. Still, regarding the polling stations abroad, regarding this matter, as you know, and as mentioned in the previous reports, the decision on the number and geographical location of the polling stations abroad is to be taken on the basis of three legal criteria. They are the following: the number of voters who participated in the last national elections, the data based on the pre-registration applications that the deadline for which was 26th of May 2021, and official statistics provided by the host countries of Moldovans, so statistics regarding the number of Moldovan nationals in those countries. So as mentioned, the deadline for pre-registration was yesterday, and after the process finished, it was found that compared to the 2020 presidential elections, pre-registration applications increased by about 40,000 applications. And thus, in the 2019 parliamentary elections, for instance, there were about 24,000 pre-registration applications. For the 2020 presidential elections, there were about 60,000 pre-registration applications, and now for these elections, there are just above 100,000 pre-registration applications. Note, though, that according to Czech, the previous applications, starting with 2018, are regarded as valid as long as the citizens did not make any changes to their data in the system. And thus, the current applications, the 100,000, these 100,000 include the citizens that registered in the previous years, as we can see. So after the pre-registration procedure was finished, the Promo-LEX has estimated the number of polling stations required to be set up abroad. As a basis for calculations for those estimations, we took 150 polling stations planned to be open according to the Czech information. Note that Czech intended, on the basis of the budget it adopted, to set up about 150 polling stations. Concurrently, as you well know, in the public space, in the very recent past, there's been some rumors, or we've heard the figure of 190 polling stations proposed by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and European Integration. And this proposal was made as understood on the basis of recommendations of Moldovan embassies abroad. So the check is to analyze this proposal of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and it is to continue to carry out the preparations required for the establishment, for deciding what the number of polling stations abroad is going to be. However, as I told you, Promo-LEX has conducted some simulations, and we'd like to share with you what are the results of our simulation exercise. So we established that should we start from the 150 polling stations as planned by Czech, most of the PSs should be set up in Italy, 28, in Russia, 21, Germany, 13, the UK, 11, France, 9 polling stations, and Romania, 9 polling stations. Concurrently, though, with no consular office or diplomatic missions in Norway and Denmark, and the small share of for the other criteria set out by the legal framework, it is problematic and costly to set up polling stations in the aforementioned countries, that is, Norway and Denmark. And speaking about the 191 polling stations proposed by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and European Integration, the greatest number of polling stations would still be set up in Italy, 37, in Russia, 29, Germany, 17, the UK, 16, France, 12, and Romania, 11 polling stations. Therefore, it was found that for at least 8 states, the number of polling stations would be different. So Denmark, Norway, as said, it would be problematic to set up polling stations there. And in Poland and Ireland, there would be one PS less, and in France, Germany, Italy, Portugal, by 1 PS more. So I'd like to highlight that in making this comparison, we are talking about comparing the data or the results of the simulations made based on data available after pre-registration procedure was closed, that is, post 26th of May 2021, and that compared against the data in the first monitoring report that was published on the 13th of May 2021. And we'd also like to highlight that the Promo-LEX Association, to ensure comparability of the data, it used for one of the three criteria, and I mean the criterion that has to do with the official statistics on Moldovan citizens abroad, and it used the 2020 data available before the presidential elections, because only those data are available in the public open space, and we were able to be certain about them when we made the calculations. And we also wanted to ensure comparability, as we said, because it's just the same data that was used for the first monitoring report. A couple of observations now regarding the nomination and registration of election contenders. According to the calendar schedule of Czech, the application period for candidate registration is 12th of May, 11th of June 2021. From 12th of May to the 26th of May, 8 political formations were registered as contenders, 6 parties and 2 electoral blocks. 2 other formations applied for registration, however, the files are now under review. There has been no rejections of applications. Also note that no independent candidate was registered. Note that when we were talking about the first report, we mentioned that the independent candidates are discriminated against by the legislation, including in terms of signature collection and further nomination and registration as election contender. One positive aspect, though, that we noted has to do with the registration of election contenders, has to do with the gender quota, which is observed. The rule says that there should be at least 40% of representatives of one of the genders on the lists. And all of the election contenders registered observe this legal requirement. As regards the LPA, local public administration, and its performance during the monitored period, Promo-LEX has found a number of issues and deficiencies in terms of LPAs fulfilling its duties around the organization of a transparent and fair electoral process. So according to our observers, of the total 43 LPAs that were visited during the monitoring period, only 26, that is, about 60% of them, have approved decision regarding these regarding places for posters, electoral posters, and regarding voter meeting places. This will be something that we'll continue to keep an eye on. We'll look into how it was implemented across the country, because our observers only started work on the 14th of May. They started the field work on the 14th of May, and all settlements of our country are to be visited. We've also found that only 13 of the 26 visited LPAs, that is 50%, have published their decisions on the information board of their settlement. There was at least one case where the decision of the LPA regarding the poster place violated the Czech regulation on electoral advertising. And we mean in this regard the fact that in Chisinau municipality, for instance, the Chisinau LPA allowed for electioneering materials to be posted on fences, which is explicitly prohibited by the aforementioned regulation. We've also noted that the LPA's powers in terms of appointing members to PEBs were overlooked. So at least 7 level 2 DECs, that is in 19% of them, no member was appointed by the LPAs, although there is this obligation and opportunity that they have. Now, with regards to election contenders, contenders and their performance during the election campaign. We have paid attention, we have highlighted in the report to the fact that most of the contenders started electioneering without having appointed a registered trusted person. They don't have the obligation to register the trusted people. Nevertheless, this is an opportunity provided by the electoral law, and Czech established in this regard that every contender can have a maximum number of 615 trusted people. And therefore, well, there is only one contender. The Renata Usada electoral bloc has in fact used this electoral provision and registered 454 trusted people. We encourage election contenders to register trusted people because they are entitled to, they can participate fully in the election campaign, they can engage in electioneering in support of the contenders they support, and they can represent the contenders' interests in relation with the voters, the PEBs, the GECs. According to Article 52, Paragraph 4 of the Electoral Code, electioneering is only allowed after the election contender is registered by the electoral body. In this regard, Promo-LEX has found that a number of election contenders or potential election contenders have started electioneering before having been officially registered in the electoral race. And thus, from the 12th to the 21st of May 2021, Promo-LEX has identified at least 15 activities of electoral nature conducted by contenders or potential contenders. When we say that these are activities of electoral nature, these are those activities or events where we are aware, we comprehend, we understand that they are for the benefit of a particular potential election contender, without nevertheless noting, hearing, finding that in those activities was a directly expressed, conveyed message encouraging people to vote for a particular contender. Still, we believe that such activities have an impact on the election campaign, and therefore we monitor them same as we did before. Most of the activities of electoral nature, about 73%, have to do with the handouts of leaflets of information materials to citizens. Most of these activities were carried out, implemented by the Communists and Socialists electoral bloc. The observers from Promo-LEX have also reported at least 18 cases of open electioneering, with an open message being put across to vote, encouraging people to vote, and these were conducted before the set deadline, thus encouraging people to vote, as I said, and a number of contenders committed that. So between the 21st and the 25th of May, there were at least 46... Apologies? There were 18 cases of electioneering reported. 17 of these were conducted by the Communist and Socialist electoral bloc, and one case was carried out by our party, a potential contender, that is. Between the 21st and the 25th of May, that is, from the moment when the first election contenders were registered onwards, at least 46 electioneering activities, electoral activities were carried out, pass 80% of the total activities mentioned, followed by the Communist and Socialist electoral bloc, 11% of the activities, and Renata Usada electoral bloc, 7% of those activities, and the Shore political party, 2% of the electoral activities. The most widespread activities are handouts of election materials and voter meetings. In the monitored period, Promo-LEX has also found at least 21 cases that can be rated as use of administrative resources for electoral promotion purposes. Of these, 120 had to do with the involvement of civil servants in electoral campaigns, and one case is about taking credit for achievements paid from public money. So 20 and 1. And also we have some notes regarding the abusive use of administrative resources. The legal framework around this issue was not amended. And And therefore, it is very difficult, with no exhaustive definition provided, it's difficult to try to tackle all the forms of abuse considering the current definition. And for this reason, we'd like to highlight that the Promo-LEX Association is monitoring administrative or the abuse of administrative resources through the lens of an international definition that is in line with international standards established by the Venice Commission and applied also by the OSCE and ODIHR. During the monitoring period, at least 3 cases were reported that can qualify as provision of presence with electoral impact. In this regard, 2 of these cases had to do with the Communist and Socialist electoral bloc, and one of the cases had to do with the Renato Osat electoral bloc. So, Promo-LEX has identified a case that can be qualified as involvement of the President of the Republic of Moldova in supporting an election contender, that is the PAS party. From the 12th to the 21st of May, Promo-LEX has found at least 150 cases of advertising of electoral nature. Most of them have to do with advertising activities carried out by the Communist and Socialist electoral bloc, that is 67%. Next is the PAS party, 11%, and Renato Osat electoral bloc, 10%. Between 21 and 25 of May, after the first contenders were registered, at least 83 cases of electoral advertising were reported concerning 5 contenders. So according to observers, most of the cases had to do with promotion activities of PAS, 89%, the Communist and Socialist electoral bloc, and the Shore Party, 4% each. Now, a couple of aspects regarding the campaign financing. On the 12th of May, Czech has established a general cap for funds, financial resources that can be transferred to the electoral account, to the electoral fund account of the electoral group or initiative group. So the maximum amount that can be appropriated in these elections is 20 million lei approximately. To be more precise, that's 20,707,700 lei. So just to know that compared to the 2019 parliamentary elections, the maximum amount back then was almost 87 million lei. These considerable differences between the maximum values established for 2019 and 2021 are due to amendments to the electoral code in August 2019, when it was established that the cap would be 0.05% of the revenues forecast in the budget law for that year as a limit for the amount that can be spent by election contenders in their election campaign. Also, Czech has established the amount of credits for election contenders, that is 50,000 lei, which is similar to the 2019 parliamentary elections. And for the independent candidates, the amount is 10,000 lei. The election contenders are also expected, or they must announce check about the person in charge of the finances, that is, about the treasurer, when the contenders are registered. And thus, Promo-LEX has found that all the 8 contenders registered by the 26th of May have appointed treasurers and announced check about them. By the 25th of May, the information regarding the opening of the electoral fund account was only submitted by PAS, with the deadline for the submission of such information by Czech being 26th of May 2021. And until the 25th of May, as far as this matter is concerned, on the Czech website there was no report of the political parties published at the beginning of the electoral campaign. But note that these reports, these statements, are mandatory. They must be submitted by political parties who intend to make wire transfers to the electoral fund account from the political party account. And the last chapter covered in the report of the Promo-LEX Association, but that is also very important, has to do with the hate speech and discrimination. And during the monitored period, to be more precise, the 11th 24th of May 2021, Promo-LEX has identified at least 33 cases of hate speech and discrimination, incitement in the public space, the mass media, and the online environment. Hate speech and incitement to discrimination include features that have to do with xenophobia, sexist language, homophobe language, and other discriminatory behaviors that lead to stereotypes and prejudice in the public space. Most of the cases were registered online in the social media, 13 cases out of 23. In 9 cases were noted in the online press and in TV programs, 5 cases for TV programs, 2 cases in public events, press conferences, and during the reporting period, 6 election contenders or politicians have used intolerant forms of expression. For instance, Renato Usati from the Renato Usati electoral bloc has committed that in 5 cases. Vladimir Voronov, Octavian Suk, Vasily Bolya, Vladimir Odnostalko have committed 1 case each. Of the 23 cases of hate speech and incitement to discrimination, potential and contenders and potential contenders were targeted. That is, Voronin Vladimir from the Communist and Socialist electoral bloc, 2 cases, and Maya Sandu, president of Moldova, was targeted in 2 cases. Natalia Albot, activist and journalist, who was on the pass list but who withdrew from the race on the 21st of May. There were 2 cases in which he was targeted, and Igor Dodon from the Communist and Socialist electoral bloc, Dumitru Diakov, Vasily Bolya from the Socialist and Communist electoral bloc were targeted in 1 case each. In this context, we'd like to know that Madam Maya Sandu was also mentioned or included, her case was also included in the report of the Promo-LEX Association, because that those cases include certain illusions that women wouldn't be able to rule, to govern, which is a discriminatory and stereotyping information, and thus we thought it was important to highlight this case as well, although Madam Sandu, the president, is not an election contender in this election campaign. And ultimately, the criteria that served as the basis for hate speech and incitement to discrimination were political affiliation, gender or sex of the person, age, opinion, color, race, professional activity, nationality, ethnicity, sexual orientation, or disability. So these are the findings that the Promo-LEX Association arrived at, and that were included in the second monitoring report that covered the aforementioned period. So if you have any questions, I am here to answer them, to provide clarifications. If not, I'd like to thank you for your presence here, for your interest, and we're looking forward to another press conference 2 weeks from now, where we'll be introducing you to the third monitoring report. Thank you and have a good day.